Hello F1 fans! Welcome back to the F1 Masters podcast brought to you by AUBG Daily. As usual, you're with myself, Harry, Vasco and David, and today we have decided to present our views on the 2026 grid and what we think it is going to look like. We had a similar episode last year for this year's 2025 grid, and some of our predictions were not very successful, so let's see if these ones will turn out better.
And we can start from McLaren. And Harry, what is your prediction for McLaren?
This is one of the, I would say, more obvious picks, and I think they're gonna stick with Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri because these are already proven F1 drivers. Lando was in a championship fight last year, and Oscar is also a very promising prospect for the future. So I think there is no reason to change there.
Yeah, I completely agree. I have Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri as well. Both won races in 2024. 2025, it is expected for them to be in a title fight. And both of them are performing on a very high level, very young drivers as well. I see no reason for McLaren to change them. This is really the best lineup possible for them at the moment.
I'm on the same opinion. And actually, probably if we're talking about somebody switching, that would most probably be caused by a better offer from some of the other teams, either for Lando Norris or for Oscar Piastri, if they promise them to be the lead guy in a team that has perspective to win a championship. But for now, it's not looking like that. If we have to give a hypothetical scenario of what is going to happen, we can look at the reserve drivers for this season. McLaren haven't announced who is going to be the reserve driver, but actually for the last year, I think it was Alex Palou.
It was Pato O'Ward.
Pato O'Ward, but also Alex Palou there is information that he was the reserve driver at some of the races.
Okay.
But I don't really think that any of these guys can be considered for the McLaren seat. So I think if there is any change, they would look at some of the other teams. But for now, I think that lineup would keep for at least another 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, an outside shot, I guess, could be Gabriel Bortoleto, since he was in the McLaren young driver program before he got into F1. But yeah, now we can move on to Ferrari, who have a brand new lineup for 2025. And I think that they will stick with that lineup next year. Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton both have contracts until the end of next season as well. And yeah, Ferrari have a perfect driver lineup as well. And I think that they will Lewis Hamilton will want to see how he'll perform with the new regulations as well as the old ones. As for Charles Leclerc, I think he will stay at Ferrari for the rest of his career. He is the Ferrari guy, so no reason for Ferrari to change this, in my opinion, best driver lineup on the grid.
Well, the star boy of Ferrari and the best driver, at least the most successful driver in modern F1 history. So I think that lineup would, again, stick for at least another 2-3 years. And if we have to discuss if there is any change, probably the closest guy that has a shout for the spot is probably Oli Berman, but it would be depending on his performances throughout the 2025 season.
I agree that these two were gonna stay until 2026 and maybe beyond, depends on when Hamilton decides to retire, but he will surely want to try out the new cars with the new regulations. So we can move on to Red Bull now, and for this team, I'm saying that they're going to stay with the same lineup. It's Max Verstappen and Liam Lawson, even though it's not really certain if Liam Lawson's going to perform at a high enough level so that he can stay. But, they don't have that many options right now.
Well, currently, I don't know how the 2025 Red Bull car is going to look like, but I don't think that Liam Lawson can perform worse in the same car than Sergio Perez in the past 1 or 2 years.
We say this about every second Red Bull driver.
Well, I just need to say it because they deserve the hate after, especially Checo after the last season. I really liked him, but that guy, it is tragic to see him not performing in Q1 or Q2. And I'm also on the opinion that Lawson and Verstappen would remain for 2026. And probably the person who has the greatest chance of being put instead of Lawson, this is probably Yuki Tsunoda. And some of the talents, I don't really see anybody who would be ready by 2026. So that is why I don't think it would be the best possible lineup, Lawson and Verstappen. But I think for now, this probably the best option that Red Bull has. So they would have to deal with it.
I'm not really confident with Verstappen or Lawson, honestly, because I think Max will get really mad with the team. I mean, especially after the car they gave him in 2024. I expect the 2025 car to be even worse. No Adrian Newey now. And I think he will want to look for a way out, actually. And whether that is Mercedes or Aston Martin or another team, I could see it. But because I just looked at the other teams and didn't really think it's as likely, I chose to keep him in Red Bull. Liam Lawson, I'm not confident they'll keep him. Red Bull very impatient, I would think, with a young driver. They have been in the past. And I could very well see Liam Lawson drop mid-season and swap with Yuki Tsunoda so they can determine who performs better in that Red Bull and decide from there. I hope Liam Lawson does well. I really like Liam Lawson, but just the history of Red Bull, in my opinion, suggests that they will not give him the time he needs.
With Lawson and Tsunoda, we have another, I think, Alex Albon, Pierre Gasly situation. And currently, I don't think that any of the two has like the potential to be really winning and performing on a top level for Red Bull. Because I think everybody expects Daniel Ricciardo from his first stint in Red Bull levels of the second driver, but currently I just don't think that is possible. And I think that the pressure that they put on both pilots, actually, on Tsunoda and Lawson, would have a negative role on them, and they're not going to be at their best during the 2025 season.
I think the main issue is that they get these young drivers that have all of these ambitions to become world champion and things like that. And they're not really looking for someone that is fine with being a number two driver like Mercedes did with Valtteri Bottas, for example. Like, if they had that kind of driver, I feel like Red Bull would be fine. But since they don't, they have these drivers really ambitious. They make more mistakes and they feel more pressure, and that's why a lot of underperforming happens in the second seat, as well as the fact that they make this car tailored to Max Verstappen's driving style, which is very unique.
Well, they tried to have their own Valtteri Bottas with Sergio Perez, but in the end it didn't turn out great. But for the young talents, I think that right now Helmut Marko, as I told you before we started recording, that Helmut Marko expects like the next big thing from the Red Bull Academy. He expects the new Max Verstappen to turn out from F3 or F2, and somebody who would be ready after half a season or after one season to fill the shoes of the second Red Bull seat. But I just don't think that is possible, because talents like Verstappen, they're coming once every 20 years, and I just don't see it currently in any of the young structures at Red Bull.
I agree with what you guys said, and I'll move on to my favorite team, Mercedes. I think they will stick with their current lineup of George Russell and Andrea Kimi Antonelli, because both of these drivers are Toto Wolff's, let's say, prodigies. He really mentored them, he supports them, and even though there are rumors that Max Verstappen may actually go to Mercedes, I'm not sure it's going to happen in 2026. I think they're going to stick to their current lineup. And what do you guys think?
I think George Russell is going to try to assert himself as the main guy at Mercedes this year. And even though his contract expires at the end of 2025, I don't think that's too big of a problem for him, because I don't think he wants to drive for any other team at the moment. And yeah, Mercedes' place. Kimi Antonelli, I think regardless of how he performs, unless he crashes very often, they have to give him another season, because he is 18 years old. This is a driver that's very young, very early in his development, so I think they need to give him time. A lot of people are expecting a Max Verstappen 2016-esque season from Kimi Antonelli. It'll be difficult to, achieve that success, but if he is close to George Russell, I think that will be quite a formidable season, and I think Mercedes, they're in love with him, so they should keep him as well.
I totally agree with the George Russell statement. He needs to assert himself as the team leader. So, if Mercedes are going to build a great car and have some successful seasons after the regulations, George Russell would be a pivotal part of that way. And for Kimi Antonelli, I think he's young. They would have to give him a chance to make mistakes and give him room for improvement. And I think if the season is not catastrophical, then he's going to retain in his seat. And outside shouts, I think, of two people, if something unexpected happens and Mercedes lose one of their pilots or decide to get rid of one of their pilots, I think that they would probably try Valtteri Bottas for one season. That would be like a transitional season. Or, and this is a very, very far shout, but because a person who was like a prodigy of Toto Wolff in the past, if Esteban Ocon has a really, really good season in Haas, I think he can be the transitional guy for one season. But really, I expect great things from Russell. He would become the team leader, I am sure. And Kimi Antonelli, after in 2-3 years, we will talk about him like a really, really great talent that we expect a lot of things from him. So that is why I think they would retain with the same lineup for the 2026 season.
Moving on to Aston Martin now, who will also move to Honda engines in 2026. I have Fernando Alonso still there and Lance Stroll still there. Lance Stroll is quite obvious. I don't think I need to get into reasoning why Lance Stroll will be there, even though I wish he would not be there. Fernando Alonso, 2026, he has a contract until end of 2026, and I think that will be his last season in F1. See the new regulations, also a fully designed Adrian Newey car for the first time in his career that he gets to drive. This is his one and final shot. If that car, I think it's actually all or nothing. I think if that car is incredible, he wins the championship, he will leave the sport. He's finally completed his third championship that he's been chasing for so long. Also, if he doesn't win the championship, I think he will eventually settle for the end of his career, because it's, I think, pretty much a long shot to continue dreaming that you'll get this final championship in Aston Martin if even after the regulations they still don't deliver it to you. So I think Fernando Alonso will have his last season in F1 in 2026, and yeah, that's why I have both drivers still staying there.
Same goes for me. I think Fernando Alonso, he has a contract till 2026, and I think he'll try at least one season with Aston Martin. And for the second seat, we know Daddy's boy, Lance Stroll. I think if they are deciding to switch to somebody else, this is going to happen in 2027. I think after they try to understand the regulations better and they have better understanding both for the engine and for the car, and they have Adrian Newey, they would have a fresh start in 2027, probably trying to get a really big name. Some media reports from the past few days have suggested Max Verstappen as a possible replacement. I still don't know, but I think that the lineup would remain the same for 2026, and we can expect a big shakeup in Aston Martin, especially if they manage to nail the car in 2027, and probably them being much more competitive from 2027 onwards.
I agree with both of you, and I want to say that they're not going to choose Lance Stroll, but it's not possible because his father owns the team, so it's going to be the same for Aston Martin. And we move on to Alpine, and I think that they're going to stick with Pierre Gasly because he had an incredible end of 2024. If he performs at a good enough level, I mean, it's obvious that they're going to keep him. And the other driver, I don't think that Jack Doohan is going to stay after 2025 in Formula One, because I don't have great expectations from him. I think I already said it in our previous episodes, and I think that they're gonna give Franco Colapinto a full-time race seat because he's the reserve driver now, and he showed glimpses of really his talent, so I think he's the pick for me.
I personally don't like Alpine as a team, as you know very well, but I think for this season, Jack Doohan is like a duct tape there, just somebody from the academy who would fill the seat for 2025. And for 2026, after the announcement of Colapinto as a reserve driver, I think that most probably they would give him a chance for at least one season in 2026. And Pierre Gasly, I love this guy. And I think he's one of the most underrated driver currently on the F1 grid. But I don't see any other team opting for him, at least in 2026. So that is why I think he will remain in the French team. And they would keep Franco Colapinto, but this time as a full-time driver. And if I have to think of somebody else who potentially can fill that seat, I can think of Alpine looking at some of the talents that don't really have a team currently, but have a really high potential, let's say Theo Pourchaire or Felipe Drugovich. But most probably, they would decide to give that second seat to Franco Colapinto.
I think it will be Gasly and Colapinto as well. Although if I was Gasly, I would start to get tired of Alpine constantly in the battle of mid, as they would say. Yeah, I mean, he's been great, but that car has not been great, and I don't know how patient he'll be with that. I think he will be one more for 2026. We also have to mention they will no longer have Renault engines in 2026, which is crazy to think. But I think Gasly, just, yeah, as you mentioned, purely on the fact that I don't think he'll be able to go to any other team. He'll stay there. Franco Colapinto, based on what I've read from multiple reports, is that Franco Colapinto signed a 5-year deal with Alpine, and I think this almost assuredly means that he will get that seat next year, as Jack Doohan allegedly has a 6-race contract, which is crazy if this is true. But I know Flavio Briatore, who came in as the new team principal for next year, he loves Franco Colapinto and he hates Jack Doohan. So I think that this is almost set in stone to be the driver lineup for Alpine.
And moving on to Haas, I think that they would remain with the same lineup, no big shakeups there. Oli Behrman, Ferrari talent, but I don't think, at least for now, that he would get the seat in 2026. And Esteban Ocon, they decided to put faith in him, and that was a strange decision, in my opinion. But if Ocon performs at least his average level, I think he would be fine. The expectations in Haas are not really high, so I think with less pressure on him, he can perform better than expected. So I think for 2026, they would try and see how the engine is going to perform, how the car is going to perform. They would try to grab occasional one or a few points in some of the races, and I think Oli Behrman and Esteban Ocon is pretty solid lineup for a midfield team.
I don't think picking Ocon was strange at all from Haas, because Ocon he's been a well-established, consistent midfield driver since the start of his career, really. I think he has good pace in qualifying. He actually out-qualified Gasly more times last season and can get that car in the points. I just feel like last year, because of his downfall in the relationship with Alpine, they started to favor Gasly and he lost motivation to drive for that team. I think he's a great driver, experienced driver that will help Haas develop. As for Oli Behrman, I think it's quite obvious he will stay, since he will have his first season in F1, and I think he'll just further develop for another year with us.
Well, but for Ocon, this is a reoccurring thing, with him falling out with his team and switching teams and being underperforming compared to his teammates. I think in his career he managed to beat his teammate only once, I think.
He beat Fernando Alonso.
Yeah, he beat Fernando Alonso, but that was a pretty lucky one because of reliability issues and so on and so forth.
You could say the same about Nico Rosberg's championship. So
no, but I'm telling you that this has been happening a lot, like problems with the team and him not performing on the same level as his teammates. So I think if this time his relationship with Haas is not really good from the beginning and Oli Behrman manages to beat him, then it would be 100% sure that the problem is with Ocon. But we'll see. He gets the chance for a fresh start, so we'll think whether he's going to grab it or he's going to be left out.
He also has the chance to be this is the first time in his career he's a much more experienced driver than his teammate. Usually it was the other way around, so I think this is really an opportunity for him.
Yeah, he will be the team leader. He will help Oli Behrman prepare himself for maybe his like Ferrari chance in the future when Lewis Hamilton retires. And yeah, he's a tricky character, Esteban Ocon, but I think that for now, like at least we have seen in the first few years with the team, he's fine, but then maybe in the future, if he stays with Haas after 2026, maybe he will have problems. But let's not talk about that and move on to RB, where I will say that they're gonna opt for Isaac Hadjar and Ayumu Iwasa, which is an interesting shout because Ayumu Iwasa is not in F2 anymore, and most people think that when you're not in Formula 2, you just like wasted your chance for Formula 1. But he's gonna drive in the Super Formula Championship, and we have seen in the past that people such as Pierre Gasly and Liam Lawson have also driven there, and then as we see, they're in F1 right now. So I think that he's a really experienced driver who has shown that he has potential, and if he is in the top 2, I would say, in the Super Formula, then maybe Red Bull is gonna consider him for this seat.
Racing bulls are complete mystery for me. I think that my prediction is for Isaac Hadjar and Arvid Lindblad to be the drivers for the next season, but I can completely see next season them having absolutely fresh lineup, let's say. For example, them having Ivasa and Pepe Marti, let's say, or Ivasa and Lindblad, if Isaac Hadjar is not performing as expected. And that is why I never know what their next move is going to be. Sometimes they can switch pilots like mid-season, and some other times, like they gave Yuki Tsunoda 4 or 5. Is this going to be his 5th season now?
It will be his 5th season.
Yes, his 5th season in RB, which is strange, and that is why my perception of the team is not really clear, because I don't know what is going to happen. But if I have to bet right now, I think that Yuki Tsunoda is not going to be part of the team. I think they need a fresh start. Yuki also needs a fresh start somewhere else. So it is a complete toss of a coin, like who from the Red Bull Academy is going to perform great in F2. And for now, I bet on Arvid Lindblad, but there are opportunities for other drivers to show that they're worthy of that seat.
I think that Isaac Hadjar is pretty much a lock because I think he'll be fine in the RB. I think he's a pretty safe driver to pick there. I don't expect him to be terrible in comparison to Yuki Tsunoda. I mean, I think Yuki Tsunoda will probably outperform him most likely, but I think he'll be fine enough to be retained. And with Yuki Tsunoda, I assume he will leave the team. I think Isaac Hadjar is pretty much a lock to stay at the RB. As for the other driver, I think it'll be Arvid Lindblad. He is one of the best young prospects, in my opinion, currently. He was very good in Formula 3. I was really impressed with some of his drives. He won a few races as well. And now moving up to F2, really the best academy driver for Red Bull at the moment, you could say, that is outside of Formula 1, with the likes of Dennis Hauger not even being in Formula 2 anymore. So Arvid Lindblad is the main guy, and I think he has huge potential, very young driver, and I think it's more likely that he has the seat over Iwasa.
And moving on to Williams, I think this is probably one of the safest bets that we can give. In my opinion, Carlos Sainz, Alex Albon, pretty solid lineup. They will not want to experiment with the lineup going to 2026. They have two pretty stable options that have contracts, and I think that this is going to be the lineup.
Yes, these are very experienced drivers already. Both were part of the Red Bull Academy. And I think that Carlos Sainz is going to become the team leader. He's going to outperform Alex Albon. Honestly, we saw that Alex Albon is not that good this season, especially when Colapinto came. So I think that he's going to maybe have a tough season.
Yeah, I think Carlos Sainz 100% a lock. I mean, where else will he go? He's just signed for Williams, so he knows it's a long-term project, so he has to get ready to stick there for the ride. As for Alex Albon, I think he will be, I guess, I don't even know how to say it, like grounded compared to Carlos Sainz. Like, he was outperforming his teammates quite significantly over the last few years, but I think Carlos Sainz is one of the top, I would say, 7 drivers in F1, and Alex Albon is just not that. And I think Carlos Sainz will expose Alex Albon quite significantly, but not to a point where Alex Albon gets dropped from Williams.
Even if Alex Albon does not perform at his best, I don't think that there is anybody from the Williams Academy or any young prospects that would be willing to fill the shoes in the second seat of Williams. So going to Audi for 2026, And once again, the three of us have the same predictions. I think this one is also pretty locked in because Nico Hülkenberg, pretty experienced guy, we know what he's capable of. And if you want a very solid performance every week in quali and in the race, Nico Hülkenberg is your guy. And with Bortoleto, very exciting prospect from the McLaren Academy, but I don't think in 2026 he would be ready for McLaren, and also I don't think McLaren would be looking to replace any of their two options. And I think Bortoleto would be performing at his best, and he will be waiting, let's say, 2 or 3 years, and when he's given his chance, he will grab it for sure. But for now, in 2026, it would be for his experience and for him growing as a pilot. So that is why I think Hülkenberg and Bortoleto would remain for 2026.
I think pretty much the exact same. Nico Hülkenberg, veteran of F1, and yeah, to help that Audi development, I think he's a perfect driver. And Bortoleto has shown so much potential. F3 champion, F2 champion. I expect a good rookie season from him. No reason for Audi to really change this lineup.
I absolutely agree. Nico Hülkenberg is a German driver. Audi is a German brand. It makes sense. And Gabriel Bortoleto, of course, they're gonna want to keep him as he's probably the most exciting, as Vasco said, of the young prospects. And let's finish off with Cadillac Andretti. I'm gonna start because I think that my prediction is pretty interesting. I would say that their first driver is gonna be Yuki Tsunoda because, as we said, he's not gonna be in the Red Bull setup anymore. He's tired because they're not giving him a chance to go to Red Bull. And Cadillac will also want somebody who has F1 experience. He has already had he's gonna have 5 years by 2026 of experience. And for driver number 2, I'm saying Jack Crawford, as he's American, he is young, he is Andretti's reserve driver in Formula E, and it makes sense because he has the connection, and they've already said that they want a young American driver. So I think this is going to be pretty interesting, but it may not happen because you guys have a different option for an American driver. So
I think that it is it would be pretty surprising, in my opinion, who they're going to pick. We still don't know who the two drivers are going to be. So that is why I have decided to put first Colton Herta from IndyCar. He's an American driver. He's not that young, but he's relatively young. And he has a lot of potential, in my opinion. And we're going to see how he would manage to capitalize on that potential in F1. And I think they would stick to the formula. One young prodigy that would be the cornerstone of the project for the coming years. And one more experienced veteran that would help with the development of the car, and at the same time it can bring some experience and probably in that case some money to Cadillac. And that is why I think Sergio Perez would be their guy for 2026. He was known as the king of the midfield, very solid F1 career. Yeah, I've hated on him a lot in the past 2 years, but I think if he's given the Cadillac car with less pressure and as the leading guy probably in 2026 because of his tons of potential in F1, I think he can be a very, very useful piece of the Cadillac puzzle for 2026 or even in the coming 1 to 3 seasons after that. So that is why I bet on Herta and Perez to be the drivers lineup for 2026.
Colton Herta, I agree with. He's been linked with F1 for a while now. Like 2 years ago, he was rumored to get that Alpha Tauri seat, if you remember when they had their whole driver dilemma. But last year finished second in IndyCar. Very impressive, actually. And also is one of the Andretti drivers in IndyCar, so it makes sense. Even Mario Andretti himself said that this seat will most likely go to him, given the connections. And also, 24 years old, actually not that old whatsoever. So I think that's perfect opportunity for him to get into F1 and for Andretti as a team who I think definitely want an American driver and someone that they can connect the American audience with. As for the second driver, I think it will be Yuki Tsunoda because he will leave RB because why would he stay there? I mean, in my opinion, he should have left RB like last year probably, but he's still there And I think that now with a brand new team on the grid, this is a perfect opportunity for him to go somewhere else. And he will be an experienced F1 driver, like 5 years, as Harry mentioned. And I think that that will play a role and he will help develop that team. And although he can have a bit of a temper tantrum at times, he's an ambitious driver that likes taking risks and goes for overtakes. And I think this is the type of driver that Cadillac would want, two exciting drivers that could really make moves in the field.
And to finish, I would be really interested to see somebody like Theo Pourchaire in that seat, but we know that something is just, whether he's unlucky or something is just doesn't feel right with his career, and that is why I don't think he would receive that Cadillac seat. And also shout out to Valtteri Bottas, because I think he can also be a very useful veteran for at least 1 or 2 seasons while Cadillac are building their name in F1. So I think this is all for today from us, guys. I hope you enjoyed the episode. We're looking forward to the next episode. Until then, like, subscribe and follow us and AUBG Daily on Instagram and Facebook, and stay tuned for more of our content. Thank you, and remember,
If you no longer go for a gap that exists,
You're no longer a racing driver.